Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and in this episode, we sit down with Franz Harary. Franz is a legend in the world of magic. He's not only done dozens of TV shows and specials, has done epic and humongous theater shows with illusions that you've never seen before, but most excitedly, the actual topic of this conversation was his consulting for actually designing illusions for famous people. I don't want to even tell you who some of these people were, but I promise you it will blow your mind. Famous artists and how he helped them consult on their shows and what you can learn about how one can consult and design illusions for musicians and for artists of all types. This was an amazing episode and you're going to learn so much as I did. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure it's going to blow your mind. So please enjoy an amazing episode with the absolutely incredible Franz Harary. Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and we are here with the one and only Franz Harary. Franz, how are you?
Hey, it's a pleasure to see you almost live in 3D.
Almost live in 3D, and we've had the pleasure of hanging out in LA and in Hawaii in your home, and we had a lovely time. We got some cool friends, man.
Yeah, we went to Chinatown. Look at there.
Yeah, we did. We bought some magic tricks too together.
That's right. Magic tricks that were like made in the 30s, I believe. By the way, the little plastic prediction box, the plastic completely disintegrated. How about yours? Did it survive?
Mine survived, but I haven't played with it as much. So possibly it's based on use. Well,
as you get older, you play with it more.
First of all, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. I want to start at the beginning where we start for all these episodes, which is, how did you get started in magic?
Well, as is the case with probably half your audience, when I was a kid, I was about 13 years old, and I got a magic set for my birthday. And I was immediately, and again, I'm sure this is a very common story, I was immediately blown away by how a simple little plastic toy, not unlike the ones we bought in Chinatown, could suddenly fool grown-ups. Here I am, I'm in junior high school, and suddenly I could do stuff that my teachers can't do and my parents can't do, and that's really empowering. I'm speaking to the choir here because I know we've all had that same experience, but I was more fascinated by why these tricks work than how they work. You get a deck of stripper cards and you realize, all right, that's how this works since the cards are shaven, blah, blah, blah. So that is the how it works. But the why, the psychology of it all, I just thought this is so powerful. And I wanted to not only understand it, but figure out if I could find a way to use this in everyday life. Now, this is me as an adult kind of reanalyzing what I did when I was a kid. When I was 13, I wasn't thinking anywhere, close to this analytically. But in retrospect, that's exactly what it was. I found this power in my hands, and I wanted to understand it and harness it and use it to, if nothing else, maybe get a girlfriend. I immediately started inventing my own tricks. And again, my folks never had any money, so everything I was doing was out of cardboard boxes and toilet paper tubes and, whatever I could get my hands on, a lot of duct tape and zip ties. And so I just started experimenting. And about the same time, Doug Henning showed up on television. And you're just young enough that you might not really have been affected by Doug Henning, but he was a big deal to me. I wanted to be him. And Doug Henning, to me, that meant doing illusions. So right off the bat, I decided I'm going to be an illusionist. I'm going to do this for myself. But again, having no money meant I needed to go find old refrigerator boxes and old, styrofoam cartons, whatever I could get my hands on. And that would be my palette. That's what I could use to create. And a lot of time, most of the time it failed. I would say 80% of the time the stuff I came up with didn't work, but every once in a while I got lucky. And every time I got lucky, I learned from that and I kept moving forward. By the time I got to high school, now I'm making stuff out of plywood, and it just kept going the whole time. When I was 16, I decided I wanted to make a car appear. But again, I got no money. But a friend of mine had a little camcorder at the time, and another buddy of mine had a crappy little sports car. So I gathered together my friends and a bed sheet and the sports car and a camera and a big parking lot pretty close to my home in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and just started experimenting until I discovered, hey, wait a second. I remembered something that I had learned driver's education. And that is, it basically was a warning. Be warned because a motorcycle can hide behind a pencil. And they go, really? There's something there. So I understood power of perspective and about seeing your world monoscopically as opposed to stereoscopically, and that can open up a whole new, and again, back then I didn't know the word design language, but really that's what it is. So I figured out how to make a car appear for the camera. And then I started doing that a lot. And in fact, I sold that method to David Copperfield for his Bermuda Triangle, making a boat appear. Yeah. And Criss Angel and Luis de Matos and Kevin J. I've sold this method many, many times. It's also been ripped off a bunch because it is so inexpensive to do because it was invented by me when I was 16 and broke. But I guess my point being is that right off the bat, I wanted to invent the next thing and not being surrounded by professional magicians. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know that there's something that I shouldn't do or can't do. So that kind of inhibition allowed me a lot of freedom to develop stuff that I'm still using today as an adult. I still use all these methods today. So kind of skipping ahead here right around junior high school, I discovered theater. And so I was all through high school, I was big time into all the plays and the marching band and the orchestra and the yada. And I was that cat. I kind of owned the school. I was into so many, plays and so many performing arts that sort of became my identity. There was a point where I didn't have to go to class because the teachers just assumed, well, if he's not in class, he must be doing something important. And I was sure that I was going to go into theater. But at the same time, I'm inventing magic and using all my friends to put together my first illusion show. And again, like I was saying, it was a big deal to me that everything was mine because I didn't want to copy somebody else. I realized very, very early on that it is hundreds of times in orders of magnitude more rewarding to do something that you invented as opposed to do something that you bought at a magic shop. And once I got that rush, once I felt that feeling, it became a drug. It really still is. There is no greater feeling than to invent and create something that didn't exist before. And that doesn't mean changing the color of a box or changing the routine, but really starting from zero and creating something that you don't know is going to work or not, taking that risk, kind of going out there, putting your testicles on the table and saying, all right, I'm going to take this chance, trying it, succeeding, and then watching an audience become affected by it. Seeing that audience reaction, it is such a rush because you know that the effect that you're having on the audience, that endorphin rush that you're giving them is purely a result of something that was born from you and that you created taking a chance. It's different. That nothing comes close to that. And look, I've done subtract and zigzag and mismade and all of the stuff, cube zags, name it. So I'm not proud of it, but I've had to resort to doing them for corporates or whatever. To me, it's painfully boring because I always feel like I'm a karaoke singer. I may sing my way, but I'm never going to be Frank Sinatra singing my way. It's being a cover band. It's fun because strangers tell you you're great. And if you need that, and there are times in all of our lives when we want strangers to tell us you're great, that's fun. But that's a very, very shallow reward. It's different from creating something yourself and knowing that you're also, in doing so, you're pushing the art form forward. You're not just making a living. There's nothing wrong with making a living. There's tens of thousands of guys out there making a living doing an appearing bowling ball and floating table. And they're great. God bless them. It's a living. But to me, that is being a craftsman. It's making the perfect donut and selling the perfect donut and you might, spend 10 or 20 years of your life making that perfect donut and everybody loves your donut.
So I have a couple of follow-up questions.
Yeah, it's different than making something new. All right, so I've just talked for 20 minutes now.
No, please. I'm just going to let you run because everything you're saying is fantastic, but I have some follow-up questions. So the first is, you started making illusions with cardboard boxes and things like that. Did you have like books or mentors, or you were just stapling stuff together and seeing how it looked? Like, it strikes me as being wild to not have any direction with that kind of thing.
I had a book that I got that Avid Smash. This sounds like such bullshit. Can I see the bullshit?
Yeah, you can say
BS. It's just such BS. I had literally one book. Let me back into this. I'm dyslexic, so I can read, and I've read a lot, and I've made a living as an actor, but I hate reading. I freaking hate reading. I don't enjoy it. So books are real low on my list. But I did have one book called Victory Carton Illusions. This was put out by Tubbs, maybe? But it was, I bought it through Abbott's. You can still get it. It's still out there. And basically, Victory Carton Illusions was my jumpstart. It told me what a modern cabinet was. I had no idea, So I made a modern cabinet out of cardboard, and I go, oh, wait a second. Okay, I get this. And I started to understand the idea of creating a false perspective, a false back, and even what a load chamber is. I didn't know what a load chamber was, So that was sort of my jumpstart. And then I moved from there. And then very quickly, as I said, I started experimenting with a big jump for me was when I got a parachute in a garage sale. Because suddenly I got a parachute with that. Oh, my world changed. To have a piece of fabric that big that I could experiment and come up with stuff with, that was a huge idea, But it was really just a whole lot of experimenting. And very early on, I remember going back to this car appearance. I showed it to, I think I took it to an IBM meeting in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I showed it to a bunch of what were then the old guys, although I think now I'm the old guy. And starting with Hank Morehouse, he goes, hey, kid, you're onto something here. So he starts showing it around to Carol Fox and all these other, legends at the time, Norm Nielsen and I go, wow. So, and I'm 16 because I didn't know what the hell I'm doing. But suddenly I've got the attention of all these in my eyes who were, the kind of Yodas of our industry. So that gave me a lot of confidence to keep going forward, But it was all, to answer your question, I wish I had a mentor. I help a lot of guys out today. I wish there was a version of me that I had when I was a kid,
Wow. Next, I'm curious about, you said you put together your first illusion show, and obviously everything was different then than it is now. But I think a lot of people at any given time are faced with like, hey, I really want to make magic a career, but I don't know how, or I don't know if I should or I shouldn't take the leap. And sometimes that happens around high school or college. Sometimes that happens 30 years into an office job. What was that moment for you that you decided to take this seriously?
So all through high school, I was inventing tricks. And at the same time, I built, which in retrospect was piracy that I'm not proud of, but I built out of plywood. I built a mismade girdle and a thin model sewing and a zigzag. Actually, I bought the Harbin book. That I might as well have bought a card because back then that money was crazy for me. Wow. So I built a zigzag and I built about 30 illusions, of which about 5 or 6 were stuff that had been out there, and the rest of them were my own. And in that, I kind of became a pretty good carpenter. Even right now, I'm pretty good. I think, I have a little zigzag. Oh, you can't see it. Hold on a second. Hold on.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
That's the little zigzag that I built when I was 17 years old.
Wow. I was just going to say,
chicken.
For people at home, it's a zigzag illusion that is the size of a rubber chicken. So it's maybe...
Yeah, it's for a rubber chicken.
Oh.
Because a rubber chicken is rubber and it bends. So I thought, hey, I can do a zigzag with a rubber chicken. So I built myself that. And then when I came back from Michigan, I brought it with me and it's in my office,
Awesome.
So I became a pretty good carpenter. And even today, I'm a pretty good carpenter. And only recently during COVID did I reveal to my wife that I'm pretty good with tools, because otherwise I'd be in work around the house constantly. So, but that cat is out of the bag. So back to your question. By the way, every question you answer is going to end up with a 20-minute dissertation.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Brace yourself. Go get a bagel, and here we go. So, all through high school, I'm building my own stuff. I got together all my friends and put together my first solution show. At the same time, I was heavily into theater. So besides acting and, doing the musicals and all that, I was directing, and so I was that guy. But at the same time that I'm Mr. Musical Theater and the band and the orchestra and all that stuff, I'm also doing magic. And pretty early on, I realized that as a magician, I didn't need to wait for a school play to come along to have an audience. I could have an audience anytime I want. I just have to book a gig in a church basement or in a bar mitzvah or, a moose lodge, and suddenly got an audience. So that was like a big awakening to be able to be in, the master of my own destiny and not need to wait for the school to say, okay, well, we're going to do a play in 4 months from now or from whatever. So I'm doing all those in parallel. Eventually, I went to Eastern Michigan University, but still designing magic. And I studied musical theater. So I actually had a scholarship. So the plan was always, I'm going to go to Broadway. I'm going to be a singer, dancer, actor. I'm going to be that guy. So while I was going to school at EMU, University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where my hometown, they have a for one, they have a stadium, 110,000 seat stadium. So I went to the director of the marching band and convinced him to letting me design illusions for the University of Michigan marching band halftime show. And I did one and it went great. And so I did many after that. And again, I will be the first to tell you, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was just going out there and winging it. But I found these formulas that I could use to do big illusions surrounded, because you're in a stadium, surrounded in the daylight for an audience that doesn't want to see you. This is a hostile audience. They want you to get the hell off of the field and go back to the football game. But I was able to win them over, understand what it takes to be accepted by an audience that's not a magic audience. And I did that all through college. Also, the University of Michigan Opera and the theater department. So I tapped into this resource that I had, having an audience of 110,000 people available to me every football Saturday, So I got good at doing magic, my own magic for football stadiums. Still studying to be a musician. I had a voice major and I taught tap dance, my last couple of years in college. So it's now my 4th year of college. Because I had this scholarship, I had to remain at a 3-point grade point average. And again, I'm dyslexic, so reading is not fun. So I pushed away all of my requirement classes, math, history, literature, all this, pushed them all away, thinking, all right, so year number 5, I'm going to have to deal with all this. And maybe I'm not going to keep the grade point average, but I'll get through and I'll get my degree and then I'll go to New York. So it is now 1984. And by this time, I'm doing more and more shows. I'm kind of making a living doing magic, doing car dealership openings. And, I was a regular at the Pizza Hut every Saturday. So not as a customer, but doing magic for the guests.
I figured.
Yeah. And I discovered, and again, it's all about resources. So I got a pizza oven. So maybe I can have them bake things into the pizza oven. So I was like baking dollar bills into the pizza, or having them bake pizzas into Dove pans, or, my whole philosophy has always been use whatever resources you have to create the next thing, I don't know why we're talking about pizzas, but so go to school. Michael Jackson announces that he's going to go out on the Victory Tour. You are too young to remember this, but in the early 80s, when Thriller came out, Michael Jackson was more popular than God. He was the most visible human on the earth. There's nobody comes close. Taylor Swift comes pretty close today, but still not as big as Michael Jackson in the early 80s. So we'll edit that. So like everybody else, I'm a fan. He's my idol, and I learned all the choreography to Thriller and all that, So he announces that he's going out on the Victory Tour. And I'm thinking, well, I want to be a part of that. So I took a VHS tape of myself making a car appear in Michigan Stadium, University of Michigan football stadium, and I gave it to my agent. This is the agent that was getting me small time corporate gigs, opening of a Denny's kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I said, please send this over to the management for Michael Jackson and tell them that I want to design magic for the Victory Tour. And every couple of days I'd call the agent and nothing. And like a month or so goes by and nothing. And finally the agent goes, look, man, I didn't even fucking send off the VHS tape. Just stop fucking calling me. You're not going to get that gig. He's not going to hire you. Just stop calling. And I was so angry. I was livid, just beside myself. And right about then, Jackson burned his hair on the Pepsi commercial. Again, this is back when you were a fetus, but it was a big deal and the world knew about it. And on television, on Entertainment Tonight, they sent the name of his attorney. So I wrote it down. I found the telephone number for the attorney in Los Angeles, called him up and said, my name is Franz Harary. I'm 21 years old and I want to create magic for Michael's new tour. And the attorney goes, well, you don't want to talk to me. You want to talk to, I think he sent me to the record label. I called the record company and they said, oh, you don't want to talk to me. You want to talk to management. So this went on like 7 or 8 people until finally I got to the right person. By that time, I had my speech down. So now it's, my name is Franz Harary. I'm an illusion designer specializing in illusions for a stadium crowd, 360 degrees. I had it down. So he goes, all right, well, let's do this. So within a day or two, I was on a plane to LA to meet my idol, Michael. So I remember I met him for the first time, April 1st, April Fool's Day, 1984 at Lion Shear recording studio here in Santa Monica in Hollywood.
Wow.
So I met him and immediately we became friends because we had about 3 years difference in age. He was a little bit older than me. So immediately we clicked and I ended up moving to LA, designing all of the magic for the Victory Tour. And I remember as I was in LA working on the Victory Tour in this giant soundstage in Hollywood, I still had to do my final exams in school for music in Michigan. So I had Lois Craven, who you call up Lois and thank her. She was a friend of mine in one of my classes. She sent me all of the basically answers to the tests. And then I was able to do everything remotely. I flew back, I took the test and just barely skimmed through that semester, but never finished school. But now I'm on tour with Michael and we're touring around the United States with the Victory Tour. I'm 22 years old and I am way out of my league, which brings me to another little point. Anything that I've ever done worth anything in my life, I probably shouldn't have been there. I was out of my element, out of my league, taking a chance and never really 100% sure it was going to work, And even with the Victory Tour, what I did, there was an Azra levitation. I put a different spin on it, but in the end, still it was an Azra and it was wrong because I didn't understand how the concert industry worked. So we rehearsed this in Zotrip Studios in Hollywood and everything's fine because we're indoors. And you know what an Azra is? It's covered up, floats up. So you can explain it to your listeners. So then we get to our first actual venue outdoors. It's Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas, and it's windy. And suddenly the Azra is flying all over the place. So during tech rehearsal, the afternoon of the first show, he starts flying everywhere like a kite. And I look into the audience and I see all these people in expensive suits, the record company and the management and all these attorneys seeing their $1 billion investment, thinking that he's flying out of control. So I felt like, all right, that's it. I'm going back to Michigan and I'm destined to do car dealership openings for the rest of my life. And again, you'll edit all this out. But I was able to overcome it by having one of his brothers basically holding onto the fabric the whole time. And it was okay. It was not great. It was okay. And then I watched videos of the show recently. And it's like, by today's standards, it was nothing. But back then, it was groundbreaking. So now I'm on tour with Michael and I'm meeting all these people. And very quickly, I became not only Michael's magician, but this young kid who designs illusions, pop concerts. So I never finished school. I moved out to LA and I became that guy. So 20 minutes later, to answer your question, that was the moment where I realized, okay, I am a magician. I'm not going to New York. I'm not going to Broadway. I'm going to do magic this beautiful time. Jump forward. Since then, I had the opportunity to work on a bunch of illusions, Disney's Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid and Cinderella, and on Broadway, Ragtime. So spent a lot of time in New York on Broadway on a stage, but I'm not singing and dancing. I'm the magic guy.
Love it.
Which is tough. It was tough to do because, I'm still by nature, I'm this musical theater guy, but still to be in that world is all right.
Awesome. First of all, what a wild story, and so incredible that you were part of, the biggest tour. And now it really is interesting how synonymous it is to Taylor Swift right now. And like, imagine a magician being that for Taylor Swift right now is like just an unfathomable role, that somebody could have. A couple follow-up questions.
I know Taylor's team, and believe me, I pitched it, but we decided not to. So I'm still doing, even like right now, today I'm working with Missy Elliott. And so it's ongoing. The difference is back in the 80s and 90s, even 2000s, I was pursuing it. Now I just kind of take what falls into my lap.
Yeah. Did you consider? Go ahead.
I did work with Dua Lipa on she did a thing with mirrors.
Wow.
On the Grammy Awards. So I was working with the art director on that. So
consider yourself an illusion designer or a magician or both? Because it sounds like a lot of your work was maybe at the time you making stuff for other people.
I made most of my early money as an illusion designer. And I can tell you that the process of illusion design is infinitely more involved, more laborious, and more rewarding than being a magician in orders of magnitude. It's fine to put on a cool looking jacket and stand on stage and point, but it is not to be compared to designing and engineering. And as I was saying earlier, creating something that came from you, putting it out there, or giving it to another artist. When I work with other artists, then it's a different process. Then you go into your mind. When I work with somebody new for the first time, I go, all right, if you woke up in the morning and you were Harry Potter and you had Harry Potter powers, how would you use those powers to entertain your audience? What would you do? You try to get in your mind and then you reverse engineer that. And so it's a different philosophy, design philosophy, than doing something for myself. Where if it's for myself, then it's usually driven by how can I fool my fellow magicians?
Right.
So it's a whole different ballgame there.
Let's talk about some of these people and maybe some of the illusions, and even more specifically, like what that process is like. You mentioned Missy Elliott, you mentioned Dua Lipa. I know you've worked with Snoop Dogg and Usher and like
MC Hammer and Madonna and Prince. And
first of all, it's crazy. You've literally worked with every single one of the biggest names in the industry. So that's just...
I never worked with Stevie Wonder. I wanted to. Mm-hmm. And I met Stevie a couple times. I went to his birthday party. And Stevie Wonder is kind of a dick, if I can say. Here's a quick Stevie Wonder story. So I go to his birthday party. First, I'm working with his team. This was on the Squared Circle tour in 1985. That's not bad. Were you even born in 85? You weren't even born now, but God, right. 85 Squared Circle tour. So I'm in there with his team. I go to Stevie's birthday party and I came up with this little kind of magician's force thing with these shapes that I made out of wood. And he goes, Franz, is magic real? So we had a really cool little conversation. So then fast forward, I'm going to do some stuff for him. So I had to hold on, I'll show you. Don't go away. I'm going to show you something cool. This is a model that I made in 1985 to explain to Stevie how all this would work. There's a set of stairs.
Wow.
See all that? So he would go inside. Curtain would go up, full of dust. The thing spins around. See, there's actually a trap door in there, the whole thing. So it's a full working model that I made to explain this to him. So I'm now in the studio and I'm supposed to have a meeting with him. And it's me and like the art designers there and the lighting guy. So about 7 or 8 different designers, and 24-year-old me is there. 20, yeah, something like that. And we're waiting. And he doesn't show up, and we wait and we wait and we wait. And now it goes into night. And so we ordered food and still we're waiting for him. So now we're sleeping in the sound studio, in the recording studio overnight. 24 hours later, he shows up. We've all been waiting there for him for 24 hours later. And he shows up, doesn't mention a thing that he's 24 hours late, and just ignores it and just moves forward and just didn't. And I realized that for as brilliant as an artist as he is, kind of a dick, you know? So that's my Stevie Wonder story.
That's wild.
I don't even know why I went off on that tangent, because there's a lot of other stories, you know?
I'm glad we heard it though. Let's talk about, I want to hear some of the specific stories from some of these cats that you worked with, but I'm also intrigued, like, what does the illusion design process look like? Do you start with a model like that? Do you start with a conversation in themes and what it is that they're playing with? Like, how does this even, when somebody says, you know what, Franz, we'd love to do an illusion in the show. What do you there?
You start out by seeing if they've got something in mind. Usually it's the same thing. They want to appear at the beginning and disappear at the end, usually. So very rarely do I get to work with an artist that's in any way a visionary. Those guys, Alice Cooper, thinking way out of the box. Missy Elliott, way out of the box. Also, Michael Jackson. But for the most part, there's not a whole lot of creativity. During the 80s, I did a thing for Run DMC. In fact, the Run DMC logo, that's freaking me. I did that logo. That was a prototype. That wasn't even supposed to be the logo. That was just a prototype that was supposed to be on the side of a prop, and now it's everywhere. Now it's in vintage t-shirt shops. So I did Run DMC, and from that, I got a call from a group called Houdini, who goes, "Hey, we're Houdini. We want to do something like you did for them, but better." And that led to a call, and I might be getting this out of order, but from all these rappers, one rapper called me trying to top the next rapper. So that led to LL Cool J and Kool Moe Dee, Big Daddy Kane, and eventually Snoop and Dre and Queen Latifah and Rage and Brandy. And they just kept wanting to one up the person before them. So it's like, yeah, you know that thing you did for Snoop? So yeah, we want to do that doper. I believe that was the term, doper. I got deep into the beginning of the really the hip hop community. I remember in 1986, I was on a subway with the manager for the New Edition. These are all groups that are way before you.
But I know all of them. Almost every group you've said so far is.
So I'm on a subway with the manager for New Edition. And I said, "So how long do you think this rap thing is going to go? You got a couple more years out of this?" And he goes, "Oh man, this is a new art form. This is going to change the world. This is going forever." And I thought to myself, yeah, all right, fine. Good for you. Live that dream. Happy to make some bucks while I can. And then I saw him again. Oh, here's another story. So I'm doing Kool Moe Dee. I'm doing LL Cool J, also 86. So in LL Cool J, his manager, who it was Russell Simmons, Russell Simmons, I think. So his office, he had just moved into his office in downtown Manhattan, and there's boxes everywhere. And so Russell goes, "So Franz, I want you to meet this guy. His name is Lior. Lior is going to be your stagehand, your roadie. He's the guy who's going to put together the illusions, push your stuff around. He's your guy. He's your assistant." All right, great. Big, tall kid, right? So I worked with Lior on LL Cool J. Fast forward, I don't see Lior for 86, 96, for like 20 years, 86, 96, 2006, maybe 30 years. I think it might have been 30 years. And now I'm backstage at the BET Awards. I'm doing Usher, and I see Lior Cohen, and he's still giant, and I was wearing a nice suit. And Leor looks at me and he goes, Franz, Harary. And I go, Leor? And we had a moment and we hugged. And I go, Leor Cohen, what have you been doing? And he goes, first he goes, Franz, what have you been doing? And I go, well, I'm still designing illusions for artists and the industry. And he goes, oh, that's cool, man. And I go, so Leor, what do you do? And he goes, I work for Sony Music now. I go, oh, that's cool. What do you do? And he goes, I'm the CEO of the company. So, yeah. So my roadie is now Leor Cohen, CEO of Sony Music.
Oh my God.
I don't know where I'm going with this. These are all disjunctive little stories.
Let's go back to the concept, because first of all, these stories
are back to the process depends on who you're working for. If you're working with someone creative, then that's a little gift, and you get to sit with them, get into their mind, and try to visualize their dreams. That doesn't get to happen very often. Usually I have to figure out who is the persona, what is the imagery that we're trying to augment here on stage, and then come up with the final effect. And then once it's approved, then reverse engineer the methodology to get me to that effect. That's if I'm working for another show. If it's me by myself, I most often start with the method, because in my heart, I'm an engineer. So I come up with methodology that's going to fool my friends. Bruce Gold, Criss, Mickey O'Connor, those are, Greg Wilson, those are my guys. That's who I try to fool. If I could fool them, if I could fool Christopher Hard, I win. That's the greatest little Christmas present of all. So I come up with, once I get a new method, then I figure out the best possible application for that method. And a good example of that was I wanted to do an effect where I drove a motorcycle through a person. So I came up with this method where there's a girl gets into a frame and puts her hands out and paper is in front of her and motorcycle, yada, yada, yada. And in the process, I realized that I really didn't need the frame at all. All I needed was a piece of paper. The girl can just put her arms out and I can put a piece of paper up there and I can pass the cycle. And then I realized that the beauty of this was that you don't need any props. So if I get rid of the motorcycle, this could be all just about human bodies. And so I ended up taking a complete left turn, and the final effect became me walking to a girl, which I actually still do today. And in the last 10 years, I got rid of the paper to where now I can just do it with a jacket. I can literally just hold a jacket in front of the girl and just walk through her, because it's all basically, that's the wrong word. Typically use the word misdirection, because you know what I'm talking about. Body parts. You get confused whose body part belongs to who. And in that, you know this thing?
Yeah.
It's
the
that.
hand
It's
going
a
through the
version of
hand.
this.
Yeah.
It's a version of the hand goes to the end with body parts that I came up with in 1988, way before this ever existed. So that is where the method drives the effect. And that tends to be the case with most of my stuff, because again, I want to fool Christopher Hart. If I'm working for someone else, then the effect is created by the method.
And when you're working with an artist, let's say they say, let's actually walk through. So someone's like, okay, I want to appear at the beginning of the show and then disappear at the end. And then the next artist.
Let's make it even better. Let's do this for you. Let's literally do this for you right now. All right. Tell me about your show.
What about it?
Give me the elevator pitch of your show, of who you are.
It's comedy magic. So it's funny. I try to have a lot of volunteers, and it's mostly using, parlor size, everyday props and objects. But right. I'll give you a hook, which is that I often do a show with my business partner, and we're always looking for something fun to do together.
So have you done any illusions? Have you thought about getting into any big visuals, or is everything stand-up? Or
we've thought about it, but have never done it. We did an illusion once on a morning show, which we built out of cardboard and mirrors.
Right.
We tried to make a person appear, but fumbled over that. So instead made 100 balloons appear.
So I'm guessing that most of the places you play, you can't afford lugging something around in a truck or having something
it's a corporate group on a small corporate stage at a venue for 300 people at a conference.
So whatever you do needs to be able to check into an airplane. You're not taking
Yes.
Okay. So that sort of gives you the parameter of the size that we're dealing with. So whatever you're going to do is going to be either fabric or inflatable, or it's got to fold out pretty small, but it's got to be big enough to allow you to pull off something that's visually going to feel like money, feel like you can charge an extra $5,000, for the show. So now here is a big, big fat question. Who are you on stage? And before you answer that, let me pose the question. If you took three famous people, these not magicians, but they could be entertainers or artists or politicians, doesn't matter, but three well-known people, and fused them together, who would you be? And as an example, myself, I am Willy Wonka, Iron Man, Doc Brown. Maybe a little Bono every once in a while, but that's more wishful thinking. Doc Brown, Iron Man, Willy Wonka. That's me. A little bit Tom Hanks. You fuse those together, and that's who I am on stage. Who are you on stage?
It's very difficult for me to say, mostly because I'm bad at famous people, but
don't not famous people, just somebody who we know. Somebody who you know, somebody that's three people. If you were to combine three people, what three people combined form your character on stage?
This is a tough exercise for me to try to come up with in a minute, but I'll say that probably, a stand-up comedian like Nick Kroll or John Mulaney, like
right.
One of those people maybe.
So let's go with Nick Kroll. You had one. Two other people you're going to combine with Nick Kroll.
I'm trying to think about maybe shows that are popular or
people. It could be anybody. Barbara Walters. It doesn't matter. Anybody.
I really, let me 1 sec.
This shouldn't be this tough.
I know, but I never
this tough because you need to, not knowing, and again, I hate to put you on the spot on your own podcast here, but it sounds to me like you don't know who you are on stage.
Certainly not in this way. No.
So that's step number one for you. You need to know who you are. And once you know who you are, then that drives everything that you do. That becomes the catalyst for everything that you present to your audience.
I'll give you two more because I'm thinking about it now and looking for some ideas. So Nick Kroll, I think, is a good one. Another one would be like a late night host, something like John Oliver, I think is a good one. And then a third one is Gary Vaynerchuk, who I think is
that's all good, but it took you too long. You should have, so spend after this podcast is done, spend some more time and really figure out who those three people are. That's going to tell you who you are. And once you got that, as an artist, your world explodes because now you know what you're going to do to communicate that character to your audience. And in doing so, communicate your human experience. That's what makes you an artist, right? So let's go with Nick Kroll. That's an easy one. Nick Kroll and John Oliver. Those are okay. Great. What part of John Oliver?
I think that he strikes me as being somebody who is articulate and more intelligent appearing in his speaking than any other. He's funny, but it's because it's smart funny and also the way that he gets excited about things in his speech,
So if John Oliver suddenly woke up in the morning and had magical powers, or decided that for whatever reason, he was going to present an illusion to an audience, what would he, by the way, I'm a huge John Oliver fan, so I'm there with you. So what would John Oliver do if he, for some reason, was put in a position where he had to do a magic show? What would he do?
Well, two thoughts come to mind. The first is that he is often, for lack of a better term, like pranking businesses or provoking businesses.
Right.
So it would be something that is probably like at the expense of a big conglomerate, or at least pokes fun at a big conglomerate. That's one just first loose idea that comes to mind.
Right.
The other loose idea that comes to mind is that he does a lot of things with like mascots, like, which I think as silly as that is, it does strike me as being like a really easy way to communicate something, is that it's like a big bird or whatever is like, so I don't know, but the two things that sort of come to mind is like a mascot, which is something that is funny visually, just the way that it interacts with the world. And then probably the illusion would be in some ways a provocative metaphor against a large conglomerate. So you're stabbing, I don't know, you're putting the oil back from an oil spill.
So Nick Kroll also is very irreverent. So that those two guys share. So it sounds to me, whatever you're going to do, it's not going to be presented in any way seriously, but there's going to be an irreverence to it.
Sure.
And there's going to be almost a cynical spin to it.
For sure.
So now you're in that world. So now you saw when John Oliver brought on Steamboat Willie, right?
Yes.
Mickey Mouse. Okay, so maybe that's your world. So now you got to say, okay, so now I've got these massive powers. What do I want to do to entertain my audience? And in the process, let them know who I am. That's going to drive home my character and make sense and not look like I'm doing a David Copperfield thing and just forced to do it. Because if John Oliver did a David Copperfield segment, he would deconstruct it. He would treat it like it was a big joke, for sure. So ask yourself the question, what would you do? And then once you find it, then we develop that. And now we back engineer a way to create that using no more space than 72 square inches, because that's what you get to check in, no more than 52 pounds. And you got to be able to set it up yourself, in the storage room of a Denny's or, wherever you're working. So that becomes the exercise to creating for someone else. First asking them who they are. And
first, it actually started with restrictions, which I think is,
But surprisingly enough, most pop stars and singers that I worked with know who they are. They know who their brand is. And at the same time, when I ask magicians, most of them don't, because they backed into this by buying magic tricks and just doing them and never asking themselves the question, who am I? What is the message that I'm putting out there on stage? My message to an audience, firstly, for the last 25, 30 years, most of my audiences have been foreign. So even though I fancy myself a bit articulate, I can't speak English to my audience. So my message is, you and I are equal. I'm not special. I've simply chosen to spend my life learning and teaching myself to do these seemingly impossible things. But just as I can do these things, you too are empowered to live your own dream and do what you want to do. That's my encompassing message. So I never take myself very seriously. I never let the audience believe that I believe my own hype. So that's sort of where the Iron Man element comes in, because Iron Man is a superhero, but he's very human. Yeah. And whatever powers he does are of his own creation and of his own blood and sweat. So that's where that comes in for me. But it took me a while to work this out. It took me some time to figure that out. So think about it, look in the mirror, figure out who you, by the way, and regardless of this little podcast here, once you figure out who you are, it's going to freaking change your world, because it's going to change your whole career as a magician. Everything's going to open up to you, and all of a sudden it makes sense. And that's, by the way, everybody who's listening to this, do that same thing. Go through that exercise. That's step number one, because until you communicate to an audience, you need to understand who the hell are you and what's your message.
Wow. The last piece that we didn't touch on from this illusion part is like, now the illusion. Like, so it's like, now you know who I am. Now what happens? You're like, I'm going to the shop. I'll see you later. Or, there's only so many
you talk about
illusion.
If it's
you can appear, disappear, you can cut in half, you can float. Like, there's only so many things.
You're defying the laws of Newtonian physics. You can take matter here, disappear, transport, transform, penetrate, disassemble, restoration, levitate, two more, I forget. But it's basically, you're defying Newtonian physics. Now, here's the problem. as technology moves forward, those possibilities start burning away. We now have levitation. We have levitation right now through magnetic levitation, but very quickly there are substances now that we're thinking, if we get them cold enough, they can float. So very, very soon we're going to have, Samsonite hover luggage. It's on the way, teleportation. We now, I don't know how involved you are in quantum mechanics or particle physics, but there's something called entanglement.
Of course.
We now understand, and some of this is showing up in Marvel movies, so that kind of educates everybody. Through entanglement, we're not just touching on the beginning of teleportation. I don't know how long it's going to take, but eventually we're going to be beaming down. So that is going to disappear. As technology moves forward, magic needs to surf that wave of technology. And at the same time, it is magic and it is us as magicians that inspire the scientific community to create the next technology.
Yeah.
So Star Trek had beaming up in the 70s, and now it's real. I mean, look at all the stuff that's coming after right now. Elon Musk and his Neuralink that's all science fiction. So science fiction has always driven the imagination of the scientific community to then invent that thing. So magic and technology are forever intertwined, interlinked in this weird dance. So each one pushing the other forward forever,
So to talk about that last step, like basically you're like, okay, now I have restrictions. Now I have imagery of who you are. Now the last step is basically to say like, okay, here's the 9 ideas that we could do. Which one tickles you the most? Like,
no, we work at it together. Off the top of my head, and this is me just kind of spitballing here, but I could see you doing something with one of those inflatable T-Rex costumes. Have you ever seen those?
Yeah, those are funny.
Those are funny. There's something funny there. I don't know what it is, but it packs small, plays big, and it's just stupid enough that you could do something irreverent with it. I don't know what it is. I would buy one of those and start playing around with it.
Wow.
Maybe it's you putting your partner in there, and then under the pretense of trying to do something, you accidentally end up repeatedly injuring him or doing something very misfortunate to him in the process. I don't know. That's something you got to experiment. But I would say start by buying an inflatable T-Rex, because that seems like your world,
It is. I actually have a trick that I was working on with an inflatable that I thought would be really cool. So that's good thinking, good consulting. When you're doing, I wanted to return back to doing this for artists, which is when you're designing illusion for an artist, like, what did you do when it was, let's make this doper, let's make this doper? Like, was it bigger? Was it like, what did that look like?
No, most of the time you're limited by how much money they've got. So that's a really tough question, because nobody wants to ever tell you how much money they got.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, everything was cash. So many times I would be given one time I was given $36,000. I had just finished doing Tupac. Tupac's story, kind of the scarier shows, because this was in Cleveland, and we were in a small arena of about 12,000 people. And I felt like everybody there would have been happy to stab me, just because just demographically, I didn't get in there, But after Tupac was done, the manager was working on, who the hell was this? I don't remember who the artist was. It might have been, this was 95, so it might have been, TLC. I just think it was TLC. So he gave me 36. They said, we want to do TLC's got this date coming up and we want to do a thing. And he came up with an idea, and it wasn't a big idea. It was relatively cheap. I said, I think it's going to cost around $36K. So he goes, hold on a second. And we're out at the front of house position, the sound light control. And he gives me $36,000 in cash. It says, here, take this. We'll see you in Atlanta, in a month later.
Oh my
God.
God.
Now I had $36,000 that I had to stick into my pocket and somehow make my way across the street to the hotel It was
Oh
pretty
my
freaking scary.
God.
And I've got a bunch of stories like that. It's very, very gangster.
You asked me before this recorded, I said, if I ask any question that you're uncomfortable with, like, just say no. And you said,
Bring it on.
bring it on. So let me ask you,
Mhm.
how much does it cost to hire somebody to design, create, and build an illusion for your tour? Like, how much does that thing cost?
It depends on who you're talking to. It depends on how good they are, how experienced they are. Are you talking to me? What do I charge?
I'm talking to you.
Me. Depends on what the show is. It's easiest to think of me as the same as an accomplished lighting designer or art director. So low end, 10 G's, high end, 100, 150 maybe. Depends on the gig, I'm working on a gig right now that's about 120. That's as a designer. And that's similar to what you're going to pay art design or for lighting or sound design.
And does that include you coming to all the shows or no?
No, that includes me working with you and the artist and the production team and developing it, supervision, the design. That's a biggie. The design and engineering, supervision of construction, supervision of installation, integrating it into the show, directing it, working with sound, light, video integration, choreography, working with all the players, and then
leaving it with
first
them
show and then send it away. Yeah,
got it. Okay, that's wild.
Sometimes I'll have one of my guys or two of my guys go out with the show.
Awesome.
But for the most part, it's me by myself. And those are some other times I've had. I did Janet Jackson Rhythm Nation in 1990. So she did a thing where she wanted to, she did a song called Black Cat. So you have to Google all this because again, you're not foreign. So she did a song called Black Cat and she wanted to change into a Black Panther. So I hired the Tiger King of all people. So the Tiger King rented me a Black Panther and I had this cage thing that I had designed and yada, yada, yada. So we're in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm teaching Janet how to do this illusion. And so we're inside this cage and it's covered up with a piece of fabric. And suddenly we hear at the back of the arena, an MTV video crew comes in and Janet goes, "Oh, I don't want them to know what we're doing. They can't know this." So I pulled the piece of fabric over and covered the cage completely. So now Janet and I are inside this little cage about 3 feet by 4 feet and about 3 feet tall. So how big is that?
Whatever, I understand.
Big washing machine, Yeah. And we're being very, very quiet. And the video crew come up on stage and they step on the stage and I hear what must have presumably been one of the big giant beta cams. One of the camera operators puts the camera on top of the cage and I hear a guy go, "So where's Janet? When's she going to be back?" And one of the technicians goes, "Oh, we don't know where she went, man. We're not sure." They go, "Oh, that's all right. We'll just hang." And so they hung around for what seemed like an eternity. It was probably 10 minutes. So they hung around forever. And I'm inside of this tiny little box trying to be quieter than I've ever been in my life, thinking I'm stuck in this little box here with freaking Janet Jackson next to me. No one's ever going to believe this. So fast forward, we did the show, the dress rehearsal, final tech rehearsal of a show is when everything comes together. Sound, light. Back then it wasn't video, but staging, choreography, everything. You're basically doing the show all out to make sure that all of the parts are integrated and work together and what have you. Those shows usually happen for an audience of the people setting up chairs or the custodial crew or the security guards. So 20 or 30 people see the tech rehearsal, which I always thought it's a fantastic experience for anybody. So I had a place in Macau a little while ago called the House of Magic, where basically I took my big show and I put it for an audience of 300 people. That's it. But we did a show that's otherwise designed for stadiums for 300 people. And it gave them that same experience like I used to have watching tech rehearsals. In the case of Janet Jackson and the Rhythm Nation, I knew it was coming. So right before I left the stadium, I went across this is actually an arena. It was an indoor arena. I left the arena, went across to this great barbecue place I found, and I bought myself the biggest pile of slathery ribs opened a card table, a folding table right in front of the stage, and basically sat there, myself, an audience of one, eating my ribs while the entire cast and crew of Rhythm Nation did the concert for me
Oh my
while
God.
I'm having barbecue sauce all over my face.
Oh my God. What a crazy story. It's like, anyways, it's so insane. It's so wild to hear, these stories. And aside from the fact that it got caught up, that hip hop got caught up with doing bigger and bigger illusions, what's the overlap here? Because I'm sure people are listening and wondering, like, what's with all these rap artists getting illusions? Like, did it just get
It's
caught
simple.
up in...
No, it's simple. It was driven by MTV. MTV, when it came out in the 80s, suddenly artists were able to visually do on screen stuff they could never do on stage. And then by the time 91, 92, by the time 92, 93 comes along, and you've got Terminator 2, now you've got digital effects. And when digital animation came along, by the time Jurassic Park showed up, there were no more rules. If you could imagine it, you could do it. The problem is that now pop artists needed to compete on stage with the imagery that they were being given in videos. And there's no way to do that unless you find a way to break the bounds of Newtonian physics. Enter illusion, because that's literally what we do as illusionists. Our old gag is to create the illusion of technology that does not yet exist.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow.
So it was just kind of a natural transition. And it's still going right now. The difference is the music industry goes in waves. Right now, there's not a lot of magic going on in concerts. Lake, I forgot his first name. He's an illusion designer.
Andrew?
Rob Lake.
Rob Lake. Yeah, that's him. Yep.
Rob Lake. He did something I thought was brilliant for
Adele.
Adele.
Yeah.
Freaking brilliant.
Sick.
I saw it.
Yeah, it was sick.
Yeah. So, but he's the exception. There's just not a lot of artists doing it right now because where the music industry is right now, there's not a need for it. It's going back to kind of that unplugged thing going on,
Yeah.
But it goes in waves. So where it is right now is in themed entertainment, theme parks. So big chunk of my work for the last 5-6 years has been designing illusions for theme park and themed attractions. So
Wow.
that's what I'm mean right now, actually.
I want to talk one more thing about illusions, which is you have put together illusion shows that are multi-million dollar illusion shows,
Right.
Things of an insane magnitude. What does that process look like? I mean, it's someone say, hey, here's the production budget, like go for it, put something together. Are you like, what does that even look like? It's just so hard for me to comprehend.
It depends on the venue. It depends on the client. It depends on the audience. You start with that and then you go with how much money you got, and unfortunately, multi-million isn't that much anymore.
Of course.
It's to do anything worth anything is anywhere from $5 to $10 million, and that's not extraordinary, Thing I'm working right now that unfortunately I can't say too much about, but it's about $12 million and it doesn't look that expensive, It's just what the cost of stuff is right now, because you're competing with Disney and Universal,
right?
And Adele and Taylor Swift. And, Taylor Swift's budget was $150 million. Beyonce was $210 million. $210 million.
Oh my God.
That's crazy money. Now, what's weird about that is that's still cheaper than a big commercial airplane. The airplane that can fly from LA to Vegas is about $100 million.
Wow.
A lot of money, But you put that into entertainment, it's a different game, But it's just everything is expensive, the whole game has changed.
And when you're designing something like that, I mean, it's hard for me to even think about the economics because it ends up seeming more like a CEO role than it does a magic designer, because you basically have to take $7 million and think about A, who you're hiring, B, what you're building, C, the set and the setup. Like, is that something that you do, or you keep to the illusion part and other people manage some of those other parts?
I am deeply, deeply involved in the videographic design, staging illusions, of course, But I've also got a killer team that's been with me for 20 and 30 years. My production manager has been with me for 30 years. My costume designer, I met on the Jackson's Victory Tour.
I met her. I met her at
did you?
your event. Yeah, at your place.
Was she there? Surely. Mary Jane, yes.
Yeah.
God,
I met her.
yeah,
She was telling me about it. She was awesome.
Yeah. Mary Jane, for 40 years. I've been with Mary Jane for 40 years. So, great people have become a family. We genuinely are a family, So, and Mary Jane will tell you that I've got my fingers in all that, but I let her do her thing. Lighting design, a Japanese fellow I've been working with for 20 years now. Graphics design is in Malaysia. So the other thing is I collect really talented people from all over the world. Everywhere we go, if I meet somebody that's great, then we are naturally attracted to each other and they end up being a part of this family. So it's spread out all of my architect is in India. My 3D designer is there's a team in China. So they're kind of all over the place. And thank God now it doesn't really matter where you are because you can do everything remotely. But I used to have to until recently, I used to travel to China and sit with the design team, or I would have to travel to Kuala Lumpur to sit with the graphics guy in Malaysia. So that's all, luckily, that's changed,
That's wild. I want to talk, I know we spoke mostly about illusions. I want to talk a little bit about television. You've done a lot of things on television, including vanishing the Taj Mahal and, making cars and boats and planes and appearances and disappearances. And how is creating for television, especially some of these bigger scale stuff, different than creating for a theater?
Well, for one, you're working in a monoscopic world. So everything is a whole lot easier. You're working the camera. Now, television has been wonderful magic for magic, and it's also been a problem because people have abused that without naming names. There have been magicians that have made their careers.
You were saying there's some people that have abused it.
Yeah. So lately with television, there have been some fairly prominent magicians that I feel have abused it because they have, and I have no problem with buying off an audience and creating the illusion at any cost.
Yep.
That's great because that's what we do. We are an illusionist, so we should use every tool possible. The problem is they've created effects on camera that they will never, ever be able to match live on stage, ever. And so when it comes time for them to perform for a live audience, which ultimately is where the money is, because it's not on television anymore, then that has bitten them in the butt because they cannot compete with their own television product. So I think there's a very, very fine line of how far you use the medium to create the illusion. But having said that, I believe you need to use the medium because, for one, what we do otherwise does not translate very well in a two-dimensional space. So in order to make 3 dimensions look good in 2 dimensions, you need to first come to terms with the fact that you are in a different forum, and it's going to mean adjusting what you do and how you do it to fit that visual vehicle.
And now that everyone is recording basically their own version of television with social media, what wisdom do you have for magicians listening to this about how to pack the most powerful stuff into it?
Oh gosh, I wish, talk to Kyle and Misty.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
I'm not the guy, I've got my 25,000 followers and that's it. But I'm an infant compared to most of these guys, Xavier Mortimer.
Yeah.
He's freaking great, That's who you ought to be talking to. Having said that, go to my Facebook page and be my friend. Just be my friend. I need a friend.
Well, we are getting to the final wrap-up questions of this. The first of which is the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest that would be really great for the show.
Bruce Gold. Bruce Gold.
Wow, I was going to say there are patches, but I didn't.
Bruce Gold. I've done this podcast now. I know what you're looking for.
You know what I'm looking for. Okay, awesome. Bruce is a good dude. I'd love to interview him. That's fabulous. Yeah. I was going to say the next catch is you have to be able to put us in contact, but I've messaged with Bruce, so that should be okay. The next thing is about modern magic. A lot has changed in the world of magic now since when you were doing stadiums for Ann Arbor or for the University of Michigan. What's one thing that you like about the world of magic now, and what's one thing you don't like?
I don't like the irreverence, the amount of exposure and irreverence, because I have no problem with exposure if you're exposing something that you created. I believe an artist can sculpt a statue, and that sculptor has the right to take a hammer and destroy that statue.
Yeah.
Where an artist can paint a painting and has the right to burn that painting. But you're not allowed to burn someone else's painting.
Yeah.
Because that's right up there with rape. You are stealing hundreds of hours of that artist's time. But more than that, you're stealing something akin to a family member. If an artist creates something that's genuinely dear to them, if you expose that methodology, you are hurting them on such a level that is beyond anything that the person exposing can even begin to imagine. Most of the people that expose magic, firstly, they're all bottom feeders, and I hope that they all die in the side of the road and pool of their own bile. And I say this from my heart. But they're also fucking idiots because they don't understand the depth and to the degree that they are hurting other people when they expose someone else's design. They're just fucking idiots. They just don't get it. And with social media, there's so much of that stuff out there. Some of these guys really, I would like to take a pair of garden shears to their nuts because it's makes me so crazy. And these guys have never had an inkling of creativity in their life, and they don't understand the process and what it takes and the blood and sweat and soul that it takes to design something new. They don't understand that. And with that, they have no regard for destroying it. That's the problem with social media. The good thing is you have an audience in your pocket. I've got anywhere from 3 to 50,000 people in my pocket anytime I want. And that's nothing. My buddy Xavier has millions of people in his pocket. Yeah. So that's freaking great. It's the next jump. When I was in high school, I had to wait for a school play to come along. Then I discovered magic and I could do it every time. The next evolution is if I get an idea, I can literally stream it right now and I can reach 5,000 people. That's freaking great. Wow. You too. I mean, you're going to get 3,000 or 5,000 people here. Yeah. And it's you sitting in your living room, I presume with no pants. So it's pretty great, you know?
Next, or second last question really is the take home point. So people have been listening to us talk about illusions and pop stars and designing and creating and all of that for over an hour.
Did I mention go to my website? Go to my
Facebook page. Yeah.
Go to my Facebook page and follow me. Did we mention that?
I'm about to mention it.
Okay.
Don't worry. So people have listened to us talk about dozens and dozens of things, from illusions to illusion design to working with incredible people. If someone's going to think back to this episode and remember like one thing, like what would be the highlight? What would be the most important thing you think people could take from this conversation?
Well, no question. Go to Franz's Facebook page. No question. Yeah. Beyond that, don't be afraid to take a risk. You know, Michael told me very early on, whatever you do it different and better than anybody else. And that's been my mantra forever. So Don't just freaking copy. If you have any attributes whatsoever and having any sort of mark or having any sort of legacy, then you got to figure out who you are and create something new that didn't exist before that comes from who you are. And if you do that, you're an artist. And until you do that, you're a craftsman. So fine, make a living selling donuts. That's fine. But while you're selling donuts, go out there and figure out how to make the next pastry that didn't exist before. You know, the two juiciest, you push the art form forward. You know, make the next donut.
Yeah, the two juiciest things for me was A, you talking about figuring out who you are by picking the 3 celebrities, and then B, what you said right at the beginning, where you said every single job that you've ever had, all the big ones, you felt like you were not qualified.
Slightly out of my league.
Which is, I think, great motto. It's a great motto for taking on projects and growing as an artist. Last thing is plugs. Franz, where should people find you?
Go to my Facebook page, Franz Harary. Franz Harary fan page. That's it. And I got a website. So go to my website, see all my magic, all that. That's fine. That's great. I almost want them to follow me more than I care that they see what I do. But
yeah,
between franzharary.com and my Facebook page, that's it.
Well, I will make sure that the Facebook page is linked to the bottom of this episode. I have been excited to be featured on the video on your Facebook page. And
let me close with asking you a question. If you were a condiment, what would you be?
I was a condiment, what would I be?
Yeah.
Ideally, mustard. Because I think that there are certain meals that can't really do without mustard. I mean, you could give or take mayo, you could give or take ketchup, I think, but mustard, like, can't have a pastrami sandwich without mustard. Like, I don't know what you're having.
You're right.
That's probably for me.
And it's sort of good for you.
Sort of good. No calories. That's good enough for me. What about you? What condiment would you be?
Miracle Whip, of course.
Gross.
Yeah.
That is gross.
I just think it'll look good on a poster.
Miracle Whip is good. Well, Franz, thank you so much for doing this. This was fabulous. You blew my mind, and everything you say is completely bonkers. You know, all of these stories are completely...
All right, so who's so far, aside from present company excluded, who's been your best guest?
I did a lot of pretty wild cats. I mean, the most interesting ones to me, like I flew to Spain to interview Tamariz, which was awesome. Darren Brown was not only fabulous.
He's my freaking hero. Darren Brown's freaking, oh my god.
Not only was he brilliant.
He eclipses all of us, you know?
Yeah, exactly. He was brilliant, but also so gracious and giving in answering, just going deep in answering everything. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of people that were fabulous. Teller was fantastic. David Williamson was fantastic. There's some people that, you know, you probably never heard of that were some of my favorite episodes, like Manuel Yasser gave one of the best interviews like of all time. There's a lot of great cats I've been lucky enough to interview.
And as I leave you, which of your guests was the biggest pain in the ass?
Well, we're out of time. Thank you all so much for coming and listening. I had a lovely time with all of you. I will tell you after I turn off the recording. Thanks so much, friends, for being here. I will see you all next Thursday. Well, there you have it. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope, of course, that you learned something. Please give Franz some love on his Facebook page. He posts some really cool videos. If you scroll back far enough, you'll find me doing some magic tricks in them. And of course, this podcast only grows because people like you know about it and talk about it. So if you like this, if you like what you learned, please spread the word and tell a friend, whether it's in your local magic Facebook group, magic club, if you're just posting it on Instagram, Facebook, or Tinder. I don't care where you post it, but all I care is that you tell the world. So thanks so much for being here. Thanks for learning something. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I will see you next Thursday. Ciao.